Ryan Cole had not been back to Hollowpine, Oregon in 11 years, and he had promised himself, somewhere around year 3 of that absence, that he never would be again. Then, his aunt called on a Tuesday morning to tell him his grandmother was dead, and Ryan learned that some promises are only as strong as the excuses you have left to keep them. He drove up from Portland on a Thursday in late November, 4 hours through increasingly narrow highway that gave way to increasingly narrow county road that gave way, in the final 20 miles, to a 2-lane strip of asphalt cut through timber so dense and so old that the afternoon light died completely by 4 in the afternoon, swallowed by a canopy that had been growing undisturbed since before Oregon was a state. He told himself the whole drive that this would be quick. 3 days. The funeral, the reading of the will, whatever needed signing, and back to his apartment and his job and his life that had nothing to do with this place. He did not know yet that Hollowpine had other plans for him, and he did not know that the thing he almost hit on the county road that first night was not the last time it would find him. It happened at 6:40 in the evening, full dark already. The headlights of his car, the only light for miles in either direction. Ryan was doing 50 on a straightaway when something crossed the road ahead of him, close enough that he stood on the brakes, hard enough to lock the tires, close enough that for 1 full second, frozen in his headlights, he saw the thing clearly. It was black, not dark brown, not the color bears usually are in his memory of them from childhood camping trips. Black and enormous, standing at a height that should have been impossible for anything walking on 4 legs, its shoulders alone higher than the hood of his car. Its fur was matted and long, moving in a way that made Ryan's mind reject, in that single frozen second, that it was fur at all. More like something wet, something that had been submerged for a very long time. And its eyes, catching his headlights for that single instant, did not reflect light the way an animal's eyes should. They absorbed it. Then it was gone, into the tree line, and Ryan sat in his car in the middle of the empty road, with his hands locked on the wheel, and his heart doing something that felt less like beating and more like flinching, over and over, for almost 5 full minutes before he could make himself drive again. He told himself it was a bear. A big bear, an oddly colored bear. A bear seen for 1 terrified second in headlights that distort everything. He believed this for exactly 2 more days. Hollowpine had a population of 1,140 people, according to the sign at the town line. A number that had probably not been updated since the mill closed in the 90s. It was the kind of town built entirely around the logging industry that had once sustained it. Streets named after timber families, a downtown of 6 blocks that had been slowly emptying out for 30 years, and around all of it, pressing close on every side, the forest. Ryan's grandmother, Ruth Cole, had lived her entire 83 years in the same house at the edge of town. The last house on Sawmill Road before the pavement gave up and became a fire trail leading directly into the tree line. Ryan had grown up in that house, raised by his grandmother from the age of 6, and he had never, in all his years there, gotten used to how close the forest stood to the back porch. Close enough that in summer, you could hear individual branches creaking. Close enough that his grandmother had installed motion sensor lights along the entire back fence line. Lights that Ryan remembered coming on almost every single night of his childhood, illuminating nothing, the beam falling on empty grass and dark trees, and nothing else that anyone could ever identify. His grandmother had died, according to the county coroner, of a fall. She had gone out to the back porch sometime after dark on a Sunday night. For reasons nobody had determined, and had apparently fallen down the porch steps, striking her head. She had been found the next morning by a neighbor who came to check on her when she did not answer her phone. The coroner's report used the word accidental. The neighbors at the wake held in the Baptist Church Fellowship Hall 2 days after Ryan arrived used different words, quieter words, words exchanged in the kind of hushed tone that people use when they believe something but do not want to be the one who said it out loud first. Ryan overheard 3 separate conversations that night, standing near the coffee urn with a paper cup he was not drinking from that used some version of the same phrase. She should have known better than to go out back at night. Nobody explained what that meant. Nobody would explain it directly to Ryan's face, not that night. But he noticed the way people's eyes moved toward the church windows and the dark tree line visible through them. And back again, quickly, the way you look at something and then look away, because looking too long feels like an invitation. His Aunt Carol, his mother's older sister, was the one who finally told him something close to the truth. On the second night, after most of the mourners had gone home, and it was just the 2 of them at Ruth's kitchen table with a bottle of wine that Carol was drinking faster than the situation strictly required. Carol said, "You remember growing up here. You remember your grandmother never letting you play in the backyard after dark. Not once, not ever, no matter how much you begged." Ryan said he remembered. He had always assumed it was just his grandmother being careful, the way old women in the country tend to be careful, worried about coyotes or wild dogs or simple accidents in the dark. Carol said, "It was not coyotes, Ryan." She poured herself another glass. She said, "This town has a story that goes back further than anyone still living can properly trace. About something that lives out there, in the old growth, deep enough that logging never touched it because logging never got that far before the industry died. Something big. Something that has been taking people from the edges of this town for longer than there have been roads to drive away on." Ryan said, because it was the only thing that felt like a safe response. That is a scary story for kids. Every small town near a forest has one. Carol looked at him for a long moment, and what was in her face was not the look of someone telling a scary story. She said, "Your mother did not leave you, Ryan." The room went very still. Ryan had grown up believing, because it was what he had been told by every adult in his life since he was old enough to ask, that his mother had left town when he was 4 years old, unable to handle single motherhood, and had never come back. He had spent years being angry about this. He had built an entire understanding of himself around this abandonment. He said, "What are you talking about?" Carol said. "She went out back one night 22 years ago, the same way your grandmother did 2 nights ago. She did not come back inside. We searched for 6 days. We found part of what we found 400 yards into the trees, in a clearing that none of the search parties had mapped before. Because that clearing was not there the week before, and was not there again the week after." Ryan said nothing. His hands had gone very cold around his own wine glass. Carol said, "Your grandmother told everyone your mother had left. It was easier than the truth. Easier for you especially. What 4-year-old needs to grow up knowing his mother was taken apart in the woods behind his own house?" She looked at him directly then. She said, "Ruth spent the rest of her life doing everything she could to keep it away from this family. The lights, the fence, never letting you outside after dark, not once, not for anything. She thought if she was careful enough, if she never gave it a reason, it would leave the rest of us alone." Ryan said, "Then why did she go out there Sunday night?" Carol did not answer for a long time. Then she said, "I do not know." But I know that in the last few months, she had started saying things about feeling watched, about seeing something at the tree line in the evenings, standing there, not moving, just watching the house. She finished her wine. She said, "I think it had been getting closer for a while. I think Sunday night, it finally got close enough that she felt she had to do something about it herself. I do not know what she thought she could do. I do not think there is anything anyone can do." Ryan thought about the black shape on the county road, the eyes that did not reflect light. He did not tell Carol about it that night. He would tell her eventually, but not yet. Not until he understood more of what he was dealing with. He started having the nightmares that same night, and they did not stop. In the dream, he was 6 years old again, standing at the back door of his grandmother's house, looking out through the glass at the dark yard and the darker tree line beyond it, and something was standing exactly at the edge of the grass where the lawn gave way to forest, tall and black and utterly still. And in the dream, Ryan understood with the total unquestioned certainty that dreams provide that the thing was waiting for him specifically, that it had always been waiting for him specifically, that the 22 years he had spent in Portland, believing himself safe, had simply been the thing being patient. He woke from this dream at 3 in the morning on his second night in his childhood bedroom and lay very still and became aware gradually of a sound coming from outside. Not an animal sound, not wind, something moving, slow and heavy and deliberate, along the back fence line, a weight in the grass that made individual blades bend and release with a sound too soft to be a footstep and too rhythmic to be anything but one. Ryan lay in bed and listened to it pass the length of the yard from one side to the other, and then, after a long pause, pass back again, checking something, measuring something. He did not get up to look. He has thought about this decision many times since, and he believes it may have been the only correct decision he made during his entire time in Hollowpine. Because looking, he came to understand over the following 2 days, was an invitation. He met Ruth's oldest friend, a woman named Doris Callahan, who had lived in Hollowpine even longer than his grandmother, at the small diner on Main Street the morning before the funeral. Doris was 86 and sharp in a way that made Ryan understand immediately why she and his grandmother had been close for 60 years. Doris said, without much preamble, "You saw it, didn't you?" Driving in, Ryan said he had seen something on the road. "A bear, maybe," Doris said. "It is not a bear. It has never been a bear." "Bears do not have eyes like that," Ryan asked her, because there was no longer any point pretending he did not want to know. "What is it?" Doris was quiet for a while, stirring coffee she was not drinking, in the particular way of someone deciding how much truth a person can absorb in one conversation. She said, "There have been names for it over the years. The loggers who first came through here, back before the town was even a town, had a name for it in their own language that does not translate cleanly. But the meaning was something like the one who was here before the trees were counted. Later people just called it the hollow because of the way it hollows things out. Places, families." Ryan said, "What does it want?" Doris looked at him for a long moment. She said, "I do not think want is the right word for something like that, any more than a forest fire wants to burn. It takes people from families it has already touched, more than it takes strangers. Once it has a taste of a bloodline, it seems to prefer coming back to that same bloodline, generation after generation, the way water finds the same path down a hillside every time it rains." She reached across the table and took Ryan's hand, which surprised him. An old woman's hand, thin and cool and steady, she said. "It took your great-grandfather in 1958. It took your mother in the year you turned 4. It took your grandmother 2 nights ago. Ryan, honey, I am so sorry. But I think you need to understand what pattern you are looking at. And I think you need to leave this town before the funeral is even finished. And I do not think you should come back. Ryan said, I cannot just leave. I have to bury her, Doris said. Bury her, and then go, and do not come back for anything, not even to sell the house. Hire someone else to do that. Let the lawyers handle everything by mail. She squeezed his hand, she said, and whatever you do, do not go into the backyard after dark. Not even to look. Not even for 1 second. It knows you are here now. It has known since you crossed the town line. The only thing standing between you and what happened to your mother and your grandmother is whether you give it an opening. He did not listen. He knows this now, has known it for a long time, has replayed the decision countless times, trying to understand why he made it, and the only honest answer he has ever arrived at is this. He needed to know. 22 years of believing his mother abandoned him, and one conversation that rewrote his entire childhood, and something ancient possibly responsible for the deaths of 3 generations of his family. And he could not simply bury his grandmother and drive away without at least trying to see it. To understand what had shaped his entire life from the shadows without his knowledge, this is the hook the whole story turns on, and it is worth sitting with for a moment, because Ryan was not a stupid man. He was successful, careful, a person who made good decisions professionally for a living, and he walked into the one situation every single person who knew anything had told him, in the clearest possible terms, to avoid. Because grief and curiosity together make people do things that caution alone could never make them do. On his last night in Hollowpine, the night before he was scheduled to drive back to Portland, Ryan waited until 11 o'clock, until the house was fully dark and fully silent, and he walked out onto the back porch. The motion lights came on immediately, the way they always had, flooding the yard with white light that illuminated nothing but grass and the dark wall of trees beyond the fence. Ryan stood at the porch railing and looked at the tree line and said, out loud into the cold November air, I know what you did to my mother. I know what you did to my grandmother. Nothing moved. He said, I am not afraid of you. This was not true, and some part of him understood, even as he said it, that saying an untrue thing out loud to whatever was listening was probably the single worst decision available to him in that moment. For a long time, nothing happened. The motion lights stayed on, then clicked off after their timer expired, plunging the yard back into darkness, broken only by the porch light behind him. And then, from the tree line, from a spot exactly where his aunt had described his mother's disappearance, 2 eyes opened in the dark. They were positioned far too high off the ground for anything that walked naturally on 4 legs. They did not reflect the porch light. They simply existed in the blackness, a color that Ryan would later struggle to describe to anyone. Not red, not yellow, something closer to the color of old blood, dried past the point of looking like blood at all. And the thing began to move toward the fence. Ryan went back inside and locked the door, and this is the part of the story he has never been able to fully explain to anyone, including himself. The lock did not matter. He heard it come up onto the back porch. He heard the boards, the same boards his grandmother had fallen on 2 nights before his arrival, creak under a weight that no domestic animal could produce. He heard something press against the glass of the back door, slow and deliberate, testing. And then he heard from the other side of that door, in a voice that was unmistakably, impossibly, his mother's voice, exactly as he remembered it from the handful of memories he still had of being 4 years old say his name. Just his name once. Gently, the way a mother calls a child in from playing when it is time to come inside. Ryan did not open the door. He sat on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinets and his knees pulled to his chest until the sun came up. And the voice did not call again, and the pressure against the door did not return. And at 7 in the morning, he packed his bag and left the funeral flowers still on his grandmother's dining table and drove back to Portland without stopping once. Not for gas, not for anything. Driving on fumes for the last 40 miles because stopping the car anywhere near that forest felt like a decision he was not willing to make. Ryan has not been back to Hollowpine since. The house was sold through the lawyers, exactly as Doris told him to arrange it. He has not spoken to Carol in 8 months, not because of any falling out, but because every time she calls, he finds himself unable to answer, unable to hear anything about that town, without hearing, underneath it, that gentle, familiar voice saying his name through a locked door. He tells himself he is safe now. 400 miles away, city lights, city noise, no forest close enough to his apartment to press against any window. He believes this most days, but sometimes late at night, when Portland goes as quiet as a city ever gets, Ryan wakes at 3 in the morning without knowing why and lies very still and listens. And twice now, in the 8 months since he left Hollowpine, he has heard something in the sound of the wind moving through the small stand of trees behind his apartment complex. 3 trees, hardly a forest at all. Barely enough to make any sound worth noticing. Both times, the sound resolved for just a moment into something that was almost but not quite. A voice saying his name. Ryan tells himself this is exhaustion, grief, the mind manufacturing patterns out of ordinary sounds because it needs the fear to mean something, needs the story to be over. He has stopped sleeping with the window open. He has started, without quite admitting to himself why, avoiding the parking lot after dark, taking the longer route around the building, even in the rain. And somewhere in Hollowpine, Oregon, in a forest that has never once in recorded history given back anything it took, something that has already claimed 3 generations of the Cole family, is very patient and has never once needed to hurry, and understands, better than any living person ever could, that distance is not the same thing as safety, and that 400 miles of highway means very little to something that was already old when the first road was cut through the trees. It took his great-grandfather. It took his mother. It took his grandmother. It has called his name twice now, from 300 miles away, through trees too small to properly hide anything at all. And the forest, wherever it grows, however small, has never once in the history of the Cole family forgotten how to find its way back to what it considers already its own.